We got some breaking news. President Biden meeting with the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. This is on the tail end of an otherwise embarrassing trip to Europe for our president. We had the G7 conference, and you've seen clips of him bumbling his way through everything. Then there was a NATO meeting, some EU-US meeting, and then ending with this summit with Putin. For some reason, Biden's handlers thought this was going to be a good idea. I don't know what most Americans' impressions are of Putin. I don't know what most people think of. He's the dictator of Russia. That's a big deal. Some pretty tough cats in Russia. Think of how evil a man would need to be. And think of the evil things. Let me word it like this. How the evil things that a man would need to do to be the president of Russia since 2000. 21 years. Well, he was the president, then he was the prime minister for a while. Now he's named himself the president again. There were elections. He won 77% of the vote. So the people love him. They just love him. He's an evil person. You'd have to be, right? But he plays it coy. That's the deal. He plays it nice and coy. So I think he tricks a lot of people. This is an NBC interview done the other day with Putin. I think the question's in the beginning of this, but if not, he's asked, hey, Putin, does Russia agents have anything to do with the hacking of our meat supply chain and the oil pipeline in the Southeast? And of course, he didn't say no. He said this.
Where is the evidence? Where is proof? It's becoming farcical. We know it well. We have been accused of all kinds of things, election interference, cyber attacks, and so on and so forth. And not one time did they bother to produce any kind of evidence or proof, just unfounded accusations.
Ooh, what? Notice he didn't say no. And then this gem, a nice little shot at our president. All right, so the guy, I'll just tell you, the NBC reporter's like, hey, last time Joe Biden met with you, he said he got right up in your face, nose to nose, and said, I know the kind of person you are. I can see your soul. And Putin said something back like, takes one to know one, or something like that. And he goes, did this happen? And Putin goes, I don't know. I don't remember that, but I'm sure Joe Biden has a good memory. Maybe one day we'll find out what really happened behind the cameras, but our guy can barely put sentences together anymore, so I'm sure it didn't go too well. Our friend John Phillips is here, KABC radio host, writer at the Orange County Register. John, long time no talk, brother. How are you?
Good to see you.
And good to talk to you as well. All right, what do you make of it, and just really how our president's done the last week or so on his first big international stage?
Well, after watching that clip of Putin on NBC, I think Kamala is envious that his interview went so much better than hers. So there's that. Materially speaking, it's funny. Trump was always portrayed as this stooge of Russia, and Biden and the Democrats were going to be the ones that stepped in and really put the screws to him. Materially speaking, so far, Trump was much harder on Russia than Biden's being. Rick Grinnell, who is the ambassador to Germany, is a friend of mine, and he told me that when he was sent to Germany by President Trump, he was given 3 tasks as ambassador. One was to return the Nazis that were still alive in the United States back to Germany. The second thing that he was supposed to do is make sure that Germany paid their NATO bills. And the third thing was to prevent that oil pipeline going from Russia to Germany. The Germans wanted it because they wanted cheap Russian oil. The Russians wanted it because they wanted to sell oil. But we didn't want it because we didn't want Germany dependent on Russian oil, because when you're dependent on their oil, you're dependent on them. And that's exactly what Rick Grinnell did. Now that Biden's in office, what's going on? The oil is flowing. Well, materially speaking, that's exactly what the Russians wanted, and it's what is not in America's interest. But because of the framing of the media, where they're portraying him as this James Bond type of character, where he's got, Putin's reflection on his sunglasses on the cover of Time magazine, they're making it seem, regardless of what actually happens, that he's going there and he's really going to let him have it, when the opposite is true so far.
Really interesting. And that was always one of the weirdest plays from the media, that Trump was ranging from a Russian spy, like a Russian agent, to a Russian stooge, when you just looked at his policies of what he did and things that Russia did not want. Like that made the least sense out of all the accusations, I would say, against Trump, compared to Biden's posture. So let's talk about like this idea of strength, right? Again, Trump is always the tough guy, right? When he goes to the G7, when he went, he like pushed himself to the front of the line, right? So he'd be the man, and now Biden's in the back of everything all the time, leading from behind, kind of thing. How much weight do you put on these power dynamics of geopolitics?
My favorite story about Trump and the G7 just showed up in the Washington Post, where he apparently threw Starburst candy at Angela Merkel, which she seems more like a Snickers girl to me. But anyway, that happened. No, this is a story of media framing. It's almost like the old school Hollywood, system, where they would put out whatever narrative they wanted to put out. Where that Rock Hudson, boy, he really is a ladies' man, because they thought that would help sell tickets. The media is framing this the same way. They're taking what exists, which is essentially a less strict version of what Trump was doing, but they're making it seem like he is James Bond over there, just telling everyone what for. And the public's buying it. And it's almost like the kids in cages. When President Trump was in office, oh my God, the kids in cages is a humanitarian crisis. How can this ever happen? It was on the news every night. Now that Biden's in office, the kids are still in cages, and it's almost like it's not even happening. So, this is the media doing him a solid with how they're portraying what's going on over there.
We mentioned this already. I want to know if there's any other play that Russia has, right? We know China believes, and I'm curious your take here too, but my understanding is China wants total world domination. They want to control the internet. They want to control the Belt and Road Initiative, infrastructure all around the world, Europe, Middle East, et cetera, et cetera. They want to control, Huawei, all the infrastructure, like cell towers around the world. Like they're full on world domination. Does Russia want that? / what do they want? What's their big vision and play for the future?
Well, they're fighting for relevancy because they have a declining population. They have an aging population. They're used to being one of the big power players on the global stage. Now they're almost irrelevant, with the exception of whenever they insert themselves into some sort of conflict. And it really is a bruise to their ego. It's a blow to their ego. They want to be back at the big kids' table. They don't want to be thought of as being a country that used to be something. So my guess is they'll continue to do what they're doing, which is inserting themselves into dramatic situations all over the place. But, right now it's the United States and China that are the two big dogs.
So would you agree with, I guess it's old news, right? But Mitt Romney's there, our biggest geopolitical threat, or, you have Obama like, oh, the 80s called and they want our foreign policy back. Where do you put them when it comes to a real life threat?
Well, I think right now it's not in dispute that China is the biggest geopolitical threat to the world. I mean, we have a pandemic thanks to them. And they certainly, at an absolute minimum, were honest with us about what they knew and when they knew it so that we could react accordingly. It played to the Democrats' political interest to portray Russia as that. But in reality, China's the problem right now.
What's our play? Like what's our vision, Biden's vision for America on the world stage? And what would he like to get out of this meeting?
Well, I think he wants to portray himself as being a guy who's in charge, that he has all of his mental faculties, that he is bringing America back to the international community, where Trump was this big, boorish guy who was pushing people around and throwing candy. And I'm showing up and I'm going to be the seasoned diplomat, and I'm going to be the guy who can operate in a room with other heads of state and they'll walk away respecting me. And that's not what's happening. If you look at the international papers, if you look at how the globe is seeing this, they're seeing Joe Biden really up close and personal for the first time, and they're shocked at how much this man has lost it. We can paper over it here in the United States because the press is friendly. The international press doesn't care. They don't care about whatever domestically is going on over here, and they are absolutely shocked at his condition.
What do we do with that as conservatives? Because Right. Obviously, that was done a lot with Trump, too, right? He's crazy. He's senile. We can't let him have the nuclear codes. And I think ultimately there was a Yale psychologist who was like disbarred or whatever the technical term is for her, like, what's the word? Like practicing or medicine on the air without a patient, like a real patient relationship. Anyway, they did that with Trump. And I don't want to question, how does a conservative question his mental faculties without being like, oh, you're just, this is just your partisanship. It's like, no, I'm actually like, this is not good for America. How do we do that?
You have to be very careful because the public will not look at it kindly if they think we're beating up on an invalid. A friend of mine is a political science professor here in California. And there was a guy who got elected to the California state legislature who was truly stupid. His first speech before the assembly was written for him by his aides on cue cards, and he wasn't paying attention. And he read the speech the first time, and then he just continued from the very beginning, from the introduction, and started to read it again because he didn't know. And eventually the speaker cut him off, and he was known in Sacramento as being the dumbest man alive ever to be elected to office. And so she told the story to her students, and they didn't believe her. So she said, all right, if you want to meet a truly stupid person who managed to get elected to office, I will have him come speak to the class. And he came and spoke to the class. And after he left, they all turned on her. How could you be so mean to this poor man? He's so nice. How could you beat up on him for doing what he did up in Sacramento? And it flipped, the script got flipped from being this guy who was not mentally capable of writing laws that the rest of us have to live by to you're beating up on a poor man. And that's what we have to be careful with Biden.
Wow. That's awesome. Terrible. But then my theory is that it'll be that or that. And then one day, boom, like everyone turns. All the Democrats, the whole party leadership, everyone turns on him. They throw him out the back door like he never existed and Kamala's president. We all celebrate it. And we're going to be gaslit into saying, oh, well, this is what the people wanted anyway. They really voted for Kamala, not for Joe. Right? So do you think they'll turn fast one day, or is they going to try to hold him up weekend at Bernie's for 4 years?
The minute it becomes politically expedient for them, they will push him in his grave and start shoveling the dirt. If you want to know what they honestly think, go back and look at what they were saying in the early days of the primary when none of them wanted Joe Biden to be the nominee. They were all saying what we are saying now. They all recognized his cognitive decline, and it wasn't particularly controversial.
Last question for you, to go back to Russia. All the hacking, the oil pipeline, and then our meat infrastructure. Is Russia involved / what do we do about this? Because it's going to turn into power and water and all the other vitals soon.
Yeah, I assume that they are involved in situations like this, and I expect that they're going to be involved in future situations that are similar to it. They are no longer the global superpower that they used to be, so they're looking for these guerrilla tactics to make themselves relevant and to kick up some dirt. So if we have to go into it with the assumption that this is just how Russia's going to behave, but the Russians aren't the only ones. I assume that the Chinese are up to similar tactics, and the Iranians and other people. So we just have to be very good at protecting our national security interests. We have to be very good at protecting our technology, because there are bad actors that are always trying to screw things up.
Wow. That was deep and insightful. I want more of that. Like, subscribe, get more.